Borderlands has always been a game about loot. Players collect this loot in the form of equipment, mostly randomly generated guns. Then they use these guns throughout a semi-open world filled with mostly linear quests. The game encourages farming for better equipment, with the sheer amount of possible guns that can exist within the game. But apart from telling a story, Borderlands 2 lacked purpose. At a certain point, players were collecting guns for the sake of collecting guns. The question of, why do I want better equipment, remained unanswered. But that's only one of the areas that can use improvement. With the reveal of Borderlands 3 at PAX East this year, I'd like to share some criticisms, suggestions, and ideas that I think can make a good game a great game. Very early on in this channel's life, I made a video called Customizable Difficulty Settings in Video Games. In it, I argued that almost any game can benefit from giving the player the ability to tailor how difficult they want the game to be. I mentioned Borderlands as a prime example. Borderlands games make you play in a normal difficulty for the first playthrough, and harder difficulty settings are unlocked as you beat the game. Some games like the Souls franchise have difficulty that is integral to the game's vision. As such, the player should have to play it in the way the developer intended. But after finishing the game, there's no reason the player can't make the gameplay more or less difficult for himself with various options. Borderlands is perfect because the more difficult you make the game, the better loot you receive. What can get in the way of having this in a Borderlands game is the multiplayer aspect. Having the set difficulty options make it easy for people to connect to one another. These options can create far too many combinations. Then again, they don't have to do away with the set difficulty settings. The optional mutators are just that, optional. However, there is another way to have both. Borderlands is famous for its randomly generated player equipment. Toss in different parts and abilities and let the algorithm have its way with them. Boom, you got a billion guns. Now they even have legs. Pretty soon they're gonna fly and even do your taxes. I think Gearbox can take this a bit further. A Borderlands game tends to feature several optional dungeons and bosses. At first I thought the Gearbox can have areas that change every time you visit them, kind of like the Moon Crash DLC for Prey. But then I thought whether it's possible to let you build one yourself, allowing us, the players, to continuously amuse ourselves with new content. Pick an area type, enemy types to encounter, configure the difficulty options for better loot probability the harder you make it, and let it work its proverbial magic. It's better to always have something new to tackle with your friends besides more of the same. Obviously, this can also be beneficial for people who play alone. I had to use a little program to trick the game into thinking that I'm playing with more people than I was, just to make the game more difficult. Borderlands 2 was a fun game, but I grew bored with it much earlier than I thought I would. The game needs to give me a reason to keep collecting better guns. Unfortunately, it's this same variety in equipment that makes Borderlands a game unsuited for most any form of competitive multiplayer. Even if they incorporate Battle Royale, Deathmatch, or even a first-person shooter MOBA game, they still can't have players go in using equipment they found out in the wild. Even so, they can still do any one of the things I just mentioned, but it may take a more intelligent person than me to figure out a competitive multiplayer mode that allows people to use their own equipment. But that's why they're the developers and I'm not, I guess. The best I can think of is the Borderlands version of the Dark Zone, like in The Division. But no matter what they choose to do, crossplay is obviously the most beneficial way to keep player count up. Unfortunately, this isn't something Gearbox can just do on their own. Crossplay is something that game developers and publishers love. It's the companies running the platforms that can be kind of skittish. Currently, it's Sony that's really dancing around it. Why? Because they're on top. But they've been slowly pressured into changing their stance in certain instances. One more thing they need is local multiplayer support for the PC version of the game. It's time for developers to realize that people are realizing that you can connect a controller to a PC, and a lot of people have a PC in their living rooms. My brother had Borderlands 2 on the Xbox One, and I had it on PC. He would play it in split screen with his wife. Now, He barely uses the Xbox One after moving his PC into his living room. In a perfect world, he and his wife could play in split screen while also playing with me through the power of the internet. Especially if they expand the multiplayer aspect of the game, it would be beneficial for the players to be able to personalize their characters. Borderlands 2 allowed for different skins and heads, about 17 heads and 88 skins for each class. That is a respectable amount of combinations, but there is room for growth. But for the love of God Almighty, no microtransactions. I guess if you want to charge players $1.50 for a chicken with a party hat on, fine, I can live with that, but the truly valuable items should be connected to in-game achievements. That is to say, they should be placed not behind paywalls, but behind playwalls. You get it? Hey, you managed to defeat Cromarex the Invincible's long-lost uncle's third cousin twice removed, using only Hyperion-made SMGs on shields-only mode. You are awarded this exclusive nightcap made from the monster's scrotum and left testicle as proof of this victory. Players can also be given exclusive and limited items for attending events. Back in the day, I used to play the browser MMO RuneScape, but even when I wasn't playing as much anymore, I would still show up for any events that were held. It usually involved a holiday of some kind, like Christmas, but the point was to collect certain decorative items that were only given away during this time. It made me keep coming back. Community events can go a long way in maintaining a player base, even if it's simply daily or weekly challenges. If you make the payoff worth it, people will come. That's what you want, isn't it, Gearbox? Nobody wants another Battleborn situation on their hands. But what do you want, humble viewer? Do I have the right ideas, or am I just a misguided fool? I know this isn't the kind of content I regularly make, but I'm sure that we can all agree that nobody wants anybody experiencing any burnout.